Right, back and we're live with you tonight here on In Focus. Local Government Association, Salga, is in support of the declaration of a national state of disaster over the energy crisis. It says blackouts have affected local government negatively and is hoping for positive outcomes from government's centralised planning and speedy execution to mitigate challenges faced by communities. President Cyril Ramaphosa declared the state of disaster during his State of the Nation address last Thursday in Cape Town. Joining us now to explain the significance of the state of disaster is Thamsanqa Ngubane, Chairperson of Salga's Electricity and Energy Provision. Thamsanqa, good to have you. Thank you very much for your time. We're hearing also tonight, or at least throughout the day in the debate of the SONA, these two issues being raised and being lifted as quite prominent. The element of centralized coordination and rapid response, or what you could call decisive action, being one of the many benefits that we could derive from the declaration of the state of disaster. But by definition, is the electricity crisis that South Africa faces now a matter that warrants a declaration of state of disaster?
Well, thanks very much. Yes. If you look at the effects that are being produced by load shedding, indeed, it has all elements that constitute what is a disaster. And as you know, that South Africa is a rules-based country where we apply the rule of law. There is a legislation that clearly defines what elements that must be present for us to refer to that particular situation as disaster. Disaster is this: it's a natural or human cause occurrence which causes or threatens to cause disruption of life of community. And that disruption has a second element. It is of a magnitude that exceeds the ability of those affected by disaster to cope with effect using their own resources. Now, we are of the view that the load shedding, which at some stage we've been without electricity 8 hours out of 24 hours a day. The effect that comes from that on the economy, on the production component, is very severe. On the provision of services by the municipality and other government department is very severe. But also the havoc that it causes in our household, at our homes, is very serious. So it is indeed bringing disruption in the community, in all components, since electricity is foundational to everything, everything in the economy, everything in life. So indeed, as Salga, on behalf of municipalities, we are supporting a declaration of what we are faced with. It is indeed a disaster, and it requires that particular response. Yeah. So the declaration will therefore facilitate us to actually do that.
So some are arguing, but this is a self-inflicted disaster, and therefore we are creating an incentive for people to misgovern, for people to loot and be corrupt, and to say, well, they can loot and corrupt and break the whole thing completely, and once they've broken it, they can also then declare a state of disaster and give themselves extraordinary powers to be able to make new laws, again, in the guise of wanting to deal with the very same crisis that they caused in the first place.
Well, I will disagree. Actually, there's no logic in that particular argument. We need to distinguish the existence and the basis upon the existence flows from. A disaster is number 3, but there is no number 3 without number 2. There is no number 2 without number 1. Right now, there is a disaster. The load shedding is a disaster because of its consequences. But it won't cease to be a disaster because it is man-made. In the definition of disaster, it says it's something which is natural or human-caused occurrence. So there is an occurrence. The fact that it's human-caused does not negate the fact that it remains a disaster because of effect that it produces. So we need to distinguish the two, the causal factor and the existence. The existence, the existing effect constitutes a disaster.
Yeah.
The fact that it is man-made does not make it less to be of a disaster.
So according to Salga, you're saying it matters not that the very same people who are the cause are the ones who are now declaring a state of disaster because the occurrence has happened.
Yes, indeed. Obviously, we are where we are because of mistakes of commission and mistakes of omission. But it does not negate the fact that we are now here. We must look at reality as it is, not as we want it to be. And reality as it is that 8 hours we are without electricity, and also are facing the consequences that are arising from that.
But from the Salga perspective, are you not worried, for example, that people are going to complain about sewage leaks, for example, sewage flowing in communities? It's a disaster. It's a human-caused occurrence. It can cause a severity of illnesses. It can cause all sorts of havoc in community. It can disrupt the normal working of people in society. And so somebody else tomorrow will say, well, let's declare a state of disaster because there are sewage leaks in the country. Are we not setting that kind of precedence?
Actually, what the people are saying is the very same reason that we therefore say it is a disaster. You know, let's analyze the consequences that arises from the shortage of electricity supply. I did indicate in my introductory remarks that here we are not dealing with just any problem. Electricity is foundational. Everything that happened at the level at household and in the economy is intertwined with electricity. If there's a problem in electricity, everything falls apart. So that argument is reinforcing that indeed we are facing a disaster and we need to take actions that are going to mitigate the severity and the consequences that comes from that. That's why you need to then say, regardless of how we have arrived here, but the point is that we are here. And complaining about it and pointing fingers is not going to attack the root causes of the current problem statement into a transformed, desired future situation. We need to take actions that are going to attack root causes. Not complaining. You can complain, but nothing will change. You can point fingers, nothing will change. Up until you deal with the root causes that gave life to these problems. And this problem of load shedding, it has a multiplying effect. Besides that, the energy is not there. Many things come to a standstill. Whether you go to the economy, whether you come to the municipality, it affects the provision of other services. Remember, electricity is not a human right, but electricity facilitates the attainment of the access of the human right. Without electricity, water is a right. People can't access water because absence of electricity causes havoc on the water system. The absence of electricity has a contribution in terms of increasing the level of criminality. There's a relationship between the absence of electricity at night and the level of criminality. The criminals are taking advantage of the load shedding at night. There is that, and also even the police can't play their role effectively when it is in the dark. So indeed, Electricity is national, and we should actually make peace with that. Yes, we are where we are because of a human occurrence. There's no dispute about that. There were many mistakes that were committed. We've done things that we're not supposed to do, and we have not done things that we were supposed to do. That is why we are here. But that is not going to actually change the situation.
Yeah. Speaking of nothing will change, and it's that question of what actions then are going to change the situation. It's unclear at this particular point to say, after declaring the state of disaster, what are the actual actions that are going to be taken that are going to change the situation? So, for example, hearing from what the president is saying is that there will be some focus on increasing the performance of the existing plants. Now, the skepticism there is that how exactly are you going to improve the performance of these plants? Because there are various factors that are affecting the performance of these plants, and these are not things that can be fixed very quickly or very rapidly as it were. These are things that would need time to be fixed. These are questions around the coal quality, right? The sulfur that is in the coal that has a corrosive effect that then breaks down the plants quite regularly. There are question of parts. There are question of original parts from the original manufacturers of these plants, and so on and so forth. So these are issues that are not going to be solved quickly by declaring a state of disaster.
Yes, I understand that we are facing a crisis, but we must ensure that the crisis does not make us to lose the balance at the level of thinking. We must be balanced. Firstly, we must not make a mistake of prescribing without first and foremost diagnosing. We must follow a doctor's approach. In as much as we are where we are, there is a cause and effect logic to this load shedding. So we need to drill down and understand the chain of the cause and effect that actually led into this disaster. And obviously, we need to then generate a response that are going to attack those causal factors. That is one. But two, it was important because this is an abnormal situation. It was important that we declare disaster. What is it that we are going to benefit from declaration of disaster in generating the response? One is that it will enable to bring all stakeholders that are there in the value chain. The response will be multi-sectoral in composition, but multidisciplinary in execution. And again, because everybody will be here, the response will be rapid and effective. Once all stakeholders are there and you line your ducks in a row, we will be able, first thing that we need to achieve, you can't just solve the problem on the go. We need to answer the question in our response. Firstly, how do we mitigate the severity of the load shedding? And then identify the cause of action. Secondly, at what stage should we then say the problem has been eliminated? As Salga was saying, our contribution in those meetings, we're going to say, use the advance and consolidate approach. Consolidate and advance. Make sure that you squeeze on what you have first. This coal-powered station need to be consolidated. It's not giving us what it should be giving us at an optimal level. We then need to answer the question why it is not giving us what it should be giving us. Generate a response plan, but also advance. Move to the energy mix, but consolidate first your coal and move to energy mix. Bring new additional energy sources that are there, that we've identified in the IRP. Yeah. Your renewables, your nuclear, your diesel, and everything else.
Yeah.
As additional capacity. So you do both, consolidate in advance by introducing additional, consolidating what you have, ensure that you reinforce from both sides to deal with the problem.
So the consolidate and advance strategy, is that something that could not have been put in place using other forms of legislation other than being able to give people blanket power, so to speak, to create new laws and new regulations in place?
I think, as I have said, the situation that we are being confronted with is not just a normal, it is a disaster, and it will require a disaster response. You can't say in your diagnosis, this is a disaster, but when you then begin to then say, how do you respond, and then you become casual. There must be a relationship between what you are prescribing should flow from what you have actually diagnosed. And as people who are also affected at the level of municipality, we've got some solution. We need to repurpose some of the money, because disaster means you elevate the problem, you subordinate all other things. As part of elevating the problem, we are saying as Salga, we need to move with speed, allocate resources so that we move with speed in bringing alternative energy sources.
Okay.
So that we make sure that even if there's load shedding, people will continue to get water. Even if the electricity is not there, there must be light, because people have a right to safe environment, and so on. And we're also saying government must also support the business sector to move into alternatives. The rooftops for both household and also business will have to create some subsidy by government, so that we also reduce the demand from the national grid.
Right. Zugod, we're out of time. Let me appreciate you. Thank you very much for coming on tonight.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much.
That is Thamsanqa Ngubane. He's the chairperson of Salga. They're outlining why they are in support of the declaration of the state of disaster. Continue in a moment.